I think you have to earn the time back because at the end of the day, everyone says, I want to live a balanced life. Balance is absolute BS. There's no such thing as balance, especially when you're trying to learn. When you're trying to learn a brand new skill set, we need to condense time frames.
All right, guys, welcome to True Talk. I got my man Jamie Cherio with me today. How we doing, bro?
I'm good, man. It's good to be back in Connecticut.
Absolutely, dude. Thanks for coming up.
Yes.
Or coming across. Actually, where are you living now?
Greenville, South Carolina.
Okay.
Coming
You
up.
dude, you bounce all around. I feel like every time we talk to you, you're in a different state.
Yeah, I was in Oregon when we first met.
That's right. Oregon to South Carolina?
That's right.
Yeah. How you like South Carolina?
Love it. Best decision I ever made.
Good, good. You've been with us for, is it 3-4 years now?
This summer will be 4 years.
4 years. What were you doing before you joined FFL?
I was a FFL staff member most recently for Grady Polson. I was his marketing director before that.
Yeah.
Had a traditional marketing business. Handful of reasons why that's not here today.
Got it.
And then had about 10 years in direct sales, network marketing, different sales opportunities.
Yeah.
I've been in business for, I think, 12 years now, and starting my insurance business is my 9th business in 12 years.
Wow. Now, so you were in business before, in sales, worked for yourself, right? And then Grady hired you as a staff member.
Yep.
How'd that happen?
My marketing business was kind of on its way out. We were dealing with a handful of things, had a partner who decided to embezzle some money from us.
Oh, that's always good.
One day there was some money missing from our checking account, and the business couldn't continue.
Yeah.
It was a multi-million-dollar business, so it really hurt.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we weren't very profitable. I mean, on paper, we looked really cool. On Instagram, we looked really cool. And I had full-time staff, 4 partners. And when it was all said and done, I was the operations guy working 80 hours a week, paying myself $2,000 a month. And it wasn't working. And my wife, she was a teacher at the time, working full-time. And then Grady, he said, dude, you should come sell insurance with me. And I was like, hey, I've got some, I'm a little jaded, for a handful of reasons being in so many sales organizations. He's like, okay, well, you're coming off a marketing thing. Come work for me and be my marketing guy. And there's only so many recognition images that I could make of so-and-so helped 5 families, 10 families.
Right.
And I was like, really? If that person can do it, like, why are you not, doing this?
Right.
And, we just ended up having a transition where my wife came home, and it was time for me to get my insurance license, and it was the best decision I could have ever made. And then Grady made me fire myself. He said, you can't do both. He said, you're way better at selling insurance and building a team. I couldn't let you continue to work for me.
Got it. How long were you a staff member before you decided to make that jump?
Probably about 8 months.
Yeah, okay. So you were just like so kind of tainted with sales. Gotcha. So 8 months later, you decide, you know what, I'm going to jump into the sales full force.
Yep.
What was that transition like? Because this is, you've been in sales, but very different, right?
I think it's very, very different because I've sold a lot of things that people don't actually need.
Right.
I've sold $500 packs of energy drinks that you absolutely don't need, but somehow I twisted your arm and said, these are really healthy for you and you should get them. And when I got into insurance, Grady's dad, Glenn Polson, he was one of my first mentors back in the day. So I've known Grady's family for better part of 12 years now.
Yeah.
And he's sold insurance, for the better part of his adult life. And he said, welcome to the most honorable profession on the planet. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, at the end of someone's life, you're the only person reaching back with a check.
Wow.
Everybody else is saying, gimme, 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 you owe us this. You're reaching back with a check. And he's like, when you have your first death claim, let me know. And
what'd you think when he told you that?
I was like, yeah, that's some cheesy thing. But then, it's just become more true,
right.
Over the years now. And, I have had, dozens of death claims at this point. And it's just been really cool because I've never left a home or dropped a phone call with a hard conversation and been like, wow, I really twisted Mary's arm to buy that insurance. It was, wow, I really helped Mary make a good decision for her family. And, of course, some people, they're going to have buyer's remorse. They're going to cancel. That's a part of our business. But I've never felt like I did a disservice to somebody by helping them get insurance.
Got it. Did you feel that in some of the past positions you were in? Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. When you look, sales is it's a powerful thing, and it's also something where you can become very manipulative.
Right.
Have you read How to Win Friends and Influence People? Mm-hmm. And the first couple pages, there's a disclaimer here that says this information is so powerful that if you use this incorrectly, you can totally take advantage of people. And he says it much more eloquently than that.
Yeah, but that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
Yep. And I mean, you sold at a high level with us, 3-time personal Hall of Famer, right? And then your agency's hit Hall of Fame once. I'm assuming you guys are on track, or is that a goal to do that again this year?
Yep, I'd like to do Hall of Fame for both again.
Yeah. Why is that important?
For so many reasons. For me, I've had so many things in my life where I haven't been disciplined at. And when I think Hall of Fame is a consistency goal at the end of the day. I don't think that, helping 30 families a month, 40 families a month is rocket science. I think anybody can learn how to do it. But where it gets a little bit more complex is, can you sustain that?
Right.
Can you figure out how you're going to do this and live somewhat of a, harmonious life where, it's not going to be balanced. Like, you're going to have to make sacrifices. You're going to miss a couple birthday parties, all the things. But, like, can you do it in a way where, like, at the end of the year, you're not about to get divorced?
Right.
Because that's where so many people in this business, they fail.
Yeah.
They figure out how to sell at a high level, but they can't figure out how to make the rest of their life kind of synchronize with that.
Right.
And then other parts of their life either start falling apart or their business starts falling apart. So I think that for me, hitting Hall of Fame the first time was an amazing thing, because I was like, wow, I can do hard things. I can do hard things for a consistent period of time. And I think that that's really bled over into a lot of other areas.
You surprised yourself when you did it?
Absolutely surprised myself. But then after I did it once, it was like, this is the new standard.
Yeah.
So now every year it's gotten easier, and every year I've helped. I've done less applications with a higher average premium per household. So I think my first year, it was like 550 applications to equal 400,000 in annualized premium for my first year. In the second year, it was closer to 400 for 400. And in my third year, I think it was 220 to do 420.
Wow.
So my average premium per house continued to go up.
Yeah.
But then also each year, life is becoming more harmonious, where I'm able to spend more time with the family. Whereas the first couple of years, it was rough.
Yeah.
I mean, but
you got to go through that to get to where you're at now, right?
I think you have to earn the time back, because at the end of the day, everyone says, I want to live a balanced life. Balance is absolute BS. There's no such thing as balance, especially when you're trying to learn. When you're trying to learn a brand new skill set, we need to condense time frames. We need to take this skill set and jam it into as short as possible of a time frame. And there's going to be so many sacrifices. There will be absolutely no harmony during that time period. And you're going to miss, just about everything. If you want to learn this that fast, you could learn this in a year. You could learn this in 6 weeks. I chose to learn it in 6 weeks so that I had the ability to scale back when I needed to. So now it's cool, because I've realized the formula for myself, and that formula for myself is 30 to 40 appointments a week. And what does that look like now in comparison to a couple of years ago? Well, a couple of years ago, it was, I'm going to dial on Mondays and Thursdays. I'm going to go out in the field, and I'm going to work, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, Saturday. And Sunday will be my day off, but I'm going to be so tired that we're not going to do anything, and I'm not going to spend any time with anybody. And if you ever mess up my dial day on Monday, it's going to screw over Tuesday and Wednesday, and I'm going to be stressed out on Thursday, and then I'm just not going to be nice to my family because I didn't have enough appointments. And I realized there's got to be a better way. And it's taken, a better part of 4 years to kind of figure this out. But especially with the transition to telesales, being able to do more appointments, not driving around, I figured out how to run, 30 to 40 appointments a week, really only selling 4 days a week. Where, because there's no longer a dial day, every day is dial day. And figuring out how, for me, my schedule at this point is, Mondays and Tuesdays are absolutely full time. Wednesdays I work from home instead of the office, and Wednesday night's like a family night for us. Thursdays I work full time, and then Friday I work from the office, but I come home early, and that's like a date night. Saturdays used to be my bread and butter out in the field, and now every Saturday morning my wife and I, we go grab coffee, kids stay at home with the babysitter, and then I work Saturday afternoon from home, and then Sunday we hang out and have family time. But it didn't, you always hear, do what I do, say what I say, get what I get. But if any new agent tried to do what I'm doing today, they would not get the same results. So you have to do what I did, say what I said, and then you can get to a point where you earn the time back. So now there's a handful of reasons. One, closing percentage is much higher. So when closing percentage is much higher, you can get away with a few things in regards to, tweaks to your schedule where.
But to your point, you're not going to have that year one.
You're not going to have that year one. And, maybe you do. Maybe you just pick this up really quickly. But I think that you really, truly do have to, earn your time. This idea of being your own boss, it's such a powerful thing, but it's also can work so powerfully in the opposite direction, because you can
Right.
be a really horrible boss to yourself.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to show up. You don't have to book all of these appointments. You don't have to do anything.
Right.
So I treat
Yeah,
it
like when you were marketing for Grady, dude, you didn't show up, it'd be a problem. Like, dude, where's Jamie?
100%.
But now you're on your own. You don't show up. I mean, it will eventually be a problem.
Yeah.
But no one's going to call you and go, dude, why didn't you dial today? How come you didn't run enough appointments today? You're on your own.
Absolutely.
You mentioned the consistency, right? Because how many times have you seen a producer come in, help 30 families, help 40 families, and then the next month help none, help 10, help 5, and do this? They have this, I'm going to hit Hall of Fame, but they don't have the discipline down. That's a huge piece of this. And I'm sure you've seen that dozens of times.
I mean, more than dozens of times. I mean, dozens of times. Every month you see it.
Yeah.
And this business, has such a high, churn ratio, not just because of people coming in and not making sales. There's a lot of people who come in and they do really well,
Right.
but they can't figure out how to sustain that for
Right.
a handful of different reasons, whether that's they're not disciplined with the stewarding of their commissions and they put themselves into a world of hurt, or they are lazy in their sales in regards to, hey, let's just see if you're going to get approved, Mike, and let's just
Right.
throw it in, as opposed to taking the time to really learn to ask hard questions and saying no to some clients. Like, no, we're not going to, we're not going to do that right now. We're going to learning when to walk away.
Yep.
And figuring out a schedule that actually works for you, that you can stick to in the long run. Have you ever read The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy?
No.
Okay, so one of my favorite books of all time, and he talks about how he had a client who had some crazy fitness goal, and he's like, okay, and the guy was, massive, couldn't 500 pounds, something like that. And he's like, I'm going to go to the gym twice a day and I'm going to do this for so long. And he goes, well, here's the thing. He's like, I'm going to let you do that, but I'm only going to let you do that for 3 weeks. Because there's no possible way that you're going to be able to sustain that in the long run. So you're going to go to the gym twice a day for 3 weeks, and then you're only allowed to go to the gym 3 days a week for the next 6 weeks. And he totally pulled him back, because he's like, at the end of the day, if what you're doing is not something that you can continue to sustain, you'll quit it altogether.
Right.
And you can go really hard for a while, but at some point you do have to scale back a little bit and find out what is going to be the thing that I'm actually going to, be willing to do and show up to every single day. Like, you can't do 75 hard for the rest of your life.
No.
Some people do. They've got, they live a hard life.
Or your first year. I mean, you talked about being unbalanced.
Yeah.
I mean, you're still not balanced. You're never going to be balanced. But I would assume you were a lot more unbalanced that first year.
Absolutely.
And there was things you had to give up. And so let's talk a little bit about the differences between that and now, right? Now, you're married, you got a couple kids now.
Yep.
You didn't at the time, right?
Nope.
Maybe it was one on the way. Your oldest is 2.
Yeah,
So you're
going to be
getting
3
going.
this summer. Yeah, so my wife was pregnant.
Yeah.
And she was at home alone a lot while I was out in the field getting started.
Yeah.
And
You were in the field then. There was no telesales.
Yeah, I was in the field, and I mean, even when we had our first new baby, it was, hey, I'm going to be home for a couple of weeks, but then I was back out in the field, and there was a lot of days that I thank my wife so much for the amount of times that she put these kids to sleep on her own.
Right.
And it's only gotten exponentially crazier with multiple children.
Yeah.
Anybody who's not a parent, when you have 2 babies, 2 is more than 1, so she's outnumbered.
Right.
And we've got a third on the way, so now we're both going to be outnumbered.
Yeah. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. So it's just it's a crazy thing. So I'm just so grateful for her.
Yeah. And you have to go through that to get to where you are now. Yeah. Well, you don't have to, but if you want to, like I remember through the first year, Carmela was born. She's 12 now. 12 years ago. You're telling me your schedule and mine was very similar. Yeah. I worked 7 days a week. Yep. There was one night, Tuesday, for whatever reason, I don't know why, Jamie, it was Tuesday nights. Tuesday nights, I left the office at 4 and went home, and that was like a treat.
Yeah.
Dude, after a few months, Carmela didn't know who I was. You could have picked her up, and she wouldn't know the difference between me and you.
Yeah.
But we had to do that to get to where we wanted to be. That was our goal, and we knew that at the time. I think that's a big key is you got to be clear. Like, I'm sure you didn't just like tell your wife bye and bounce. Like, you had to lay this out. Like, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna sacrifice this now because they got to be on the same page.
They have to be on the same page, but I think a big myth in this business, and really any sales business, you always hear the cliche, if you're going to get involved in sales, make sure you have a conversation with your spouse. And everyone, I think the myth is you only need to have that conversation once.
Yeah.
No. I've had this conversation every week, every day for the last 4 years, and there are days when, transparently, she's not going to mind me saying this. She's like, what is the vision?
Right.
Where are you leading us? Like, where are we going with this? What is the light at the end of the tunnel? And there's been days where I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what the light at the end of the tunnel is. All I know is that tomorrow I need to go and hunt for our food.
Yep.
And that's a hard conversation to have, because she's like, well, why am I making this sacrifice here? You're making that sacrifice there. But like, what are we working towards?
Right.
And it takes time to develop that vision. And we've had some really hard conversations. And there's been many days, more than I can count, where I've gotten home at 10:30 and we've stayed awake until 2 a.m. And in between, babies waking up, putting them back down, coming back to our conversation, getting cut off, doing it over again, staying up till 2 a.m. to have these hard conversations about, hey, here's where we're going and here's why we're doing what we're doing. It's the only way to be able to stay on the same page. And if you're going to sell at a high level, if you're going to be in commission-based sales, you have to be on the same page with your spouse. And it is not one conversation. It's a conversation for the rest of your life.
Absolutely. Yep. And a lot of times to remind yourself. It's easy to kind of get off track or get in your head or forget why you're doing this, right? I always say you got to have a big enough why, and you got to revisit it. Absolutely. The why you had 3 years ago, I would be willing to bet it's not the same why you have now.
It's totally different. And I think that I fell into the camp of the people that was work as hard as you possibly can right now so that you don't have to miss things later. I will sacrifice everything from when my kids are little so that when they're 5, I can coach their soccer team.
Right.
And I still believe in that to a point.
Yeah.
But I think I've realized I wasn't willing to, to challenge my marriage in a way that's going to get us divorced for me or, my kids not knowing me. So there are, different sacrifices that have to be made in terms of getting better so that you can figure out how I can be home 2 nights a week, or 3 nights a week, whatever that thing is, figuring out, okay, well, I'm going to sacrifice more, or I'm going to spend more on leads, or I'm going to have a dialer back me up so I can make sure that on the times that I am with my family, someone's still booking me appointments. So there's things that have evolved in my business that have allowed me to be able to, make that time for my family. Or in our family, we don't say make time because you can't make more time. We take time.
Right.
You have to take time for the things that are important. So we take those things first, and then the business fills in all the rest of the cracks.
Right.
So if we're looking at the 7 days of the schedule, it took me a really long time to being willing. I was very selfish with my time, and the business was the most important thing, and my family felt like it was more important than them.
Right.
So then I had to say, hey, no, you guys are actually the most important, and this is really, really hard for me. But can I trust that, God can do more with my schedule than I can? Can I say he can do more with 5 days than I can do with 7? Can I say, okay, I'm going to put the family time in there first.
Right.
And then I'm going to fill in the gaps, where I was like, no, I got to get my 30 appointments, and then whatever's left over, you guys can have some crumbs.
Yeah.
I was like, no, how do I give you guys the first portion, and then my business can have what's ever left over?
Because once it's scheduled, you'll work around it. But to your point, a lot of times people would leave that for last, and then they don't play the whole, if you don't plan to, you fail to plan, you plan to fail, whatnot. Going back to something you said earlier, Grady's dad, he kind of prepped you for the insurance business, right? And he brought up death claims. And did he say call him or let him know when you have your first one?
Yeah, he just basically was like, when you have your first death claim, like, you'll know what I mean by this is the most honorable profession.
You remember your first death claim?
I do actually. Because I remember sitting with the woman in her house, and she was somebody who thought that she couldn't get covered.
Okay.
And ironically, she got immediate coverage.
Yeah.
She was someone who didn't have really anything wrong with her, but she was just someone who was like, no. Like, my issues are so bad that nobody can cover me. And I remember sitting on her couch with her, having her son call in, and then me needing to explain to her son that I was who I says I was, and I'm sitting in this final expense client's house, sending my licenses. He's verifying me with the Oregon Department of Insurance, all of these things, just so that we can get a $10,000 policy in place. And then I remember I left the house. She gave me a hug, all the things. I'm like, oh, that was a nice experience. And then maybe a year or two later, or probably wasn't even that, probably a year later, because it was pretty early in my career, I get a phone call, and hey, I'm so and so, and I'm like, who is this? Like, this is my mom. I'm like, oh, I recognize that name, but I didn't right away recognize the memory of whose house I sat in.
Okay.
But then he's like, hey, here's my address. Can you come over, help me fill out the paperwork? I'm like, yeah, I'm in between appointments. I'll come over and fill out the paperwork. And it's like, I walked in the house, and when I walked in the house, like, the whole appointment flashed back. So I'm like, I remember sitting right there on the couch. And what was cool is I'm sitting there with the son and the daughter, and I was able to, like, share this experience that I had with their mom with them.
Wow.
And how joyful she was and all of these things while we're filling out death claim paperwork.
Yeah.
And that was like, you know, such a treat to be able to give them that memory when they're sitting there trying to, you know, remember all the good times. And, you know, $10,000. It wasn't $1 million check, but it made a difference because they didn't know how they were going to pay for things.
Right.
And it was enough that they didn't have to come out of pocket. So that's one I'll never forget.
Yeah. Yeah. Did it after that, you know, that meeting, did you kind of go back to what Grady's dad said? Did it feel that impactful to you?
Absolutely. And then I started having agents having the exact same thing. I had agents who, you know, I remember one in particular, agent sat down with like a 50-something-year-old guy who was like, I don't want it, I don't want it, I don't want it. And the wife's like, come on, let's just get it. And he's like, I'm just going to get it, and then we're going to cancel it. Then he ended up dying of a heart attack, and the policy was in force, and a big payout happened. And they were very grateful that they didn't cancel it. And I started seeing stories like that popping up everywhere. And, you know, for a long time, I used to hear people before I had my first one get up on stage and be like, and then I had my first death claim. I'm like, yeah. But then, like, it actually happens, and you're like, oh, this is a real business.
Right.
Like, we actually are reaching back with a check. We're actually helping families.
Absolutely. What changed for you moving forward after that?
Willing to be more direct with clients. Willing to question clients' reality. Yeah. Clients being weird for whatever reason about why they don't want to share their personal information. And, you know, obviously I'm not going to, like, you know, force someone to do anything. Sure. But willing to question the reality of, you know, they have some, like, a weird objection that's not really a real objection. They're just, like, trying to, you know, they're a procrastinator in general. So being willing to, like, talk to them about, like, no, like, what's actually going to happen if we don't put
things
this in
that are
place?
Uncomfortable.
Things that aren't, I think that's probably one of the biggest ways that I've grown in business and in life is being able to have uncomfortable conversations with strangers.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's literally what we do all day, every day.
Yeah, I mean, I always joke around with people. I'm like, it's kind of morbid. I talk about death all day. Yeah. But we help people.
Yep. Now, we were talking a little bit before we got on here about the evolution of this business, and you came in at a time where you really saw that turn. Like, you know, like I started, 2009, I got my license. We were all paper apps. Like, the e-app was the big thing for us, you know. Totally. Now it's like, you know, virtual sales, telesales, instant decision, all kinds of stuff. Back in the day, we'd send the application, Jamie, and, like, hopefully in 2 weeks we'd hear something back, you know.
Absolutely.
Now, you've seen quite the evolution, dude. What is it like to try to keep up with that? And also, it changes your recruiting too, right?
It really does. I was joking with you earlier about how I feel like the kid who was born in the 80s or the 90s, who was they remember the 8-track, but they never actually used them.
Right.
They grew up with CDs and DVDs, but they saw everything transition. And they also used to play outside until the streetlights came on. Sure. But we also saw the internet come. Yeah. And we're like the last generation who experienced both, what it was like before and what it's like now. And I feel that way being in the insurance industry, where when I first came in, I was there when, you know, FFL had the crazy, you know, CRM double bill thing and all of that. I was there when it was, you know, final expense mailers and, you know, mortgage protection mailers, and when mortgage mailers were $30 a piece, you know. And I feel like I'm like, oh, back in the day, you know, it used to be like
back in my day.
And it's just been really cool to see how this business has evolved, or when internet leads became a big thing for the company, and then to see everything go virtual. So when I first started, I was 100% in the field. Telesales wasn't an option. I think someone told me that we weren't allowed to do telesales.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
You know, and no matter what, I was going to go see you in person. Whether I had to drive 200 miles to come see you, I'm going to come see you. And I looked at it as, you know, okay, I'm just going to listen to some training while I drive around in the car. So I would, you know, basically have a stack of, you know, leads, and they were printed out from my my printer, and I would sit there, and my CRM was, I have a stack of papers that are first calls, second calls, third calls, and another stack of papers that are follow-ups and think about it. And I had stacks of paper everywhere, and I had paper coming out my ears, and then I would come and see you in the home, and a lot of it was, you know, final expense just to get started, and then, you know, started to add in mortgage protection. And I did that for probably the first 2,000 to 3,000 appointments that I did for the first 2 years, and I learned a lot. And then technology started to come in, and I went from organizing everything in paper stacks to, oh, I'm going to get a Google spreadsheet, and I'm going to highlight my clients green if they book an appointment, or red if they don't want to talk to me, and yellow if I need to follow up. And that was my CRM. And now just it continues to transition. And I remember how uncomfortable I was at every transition. I don't like change. Right. So evolving with this business has always been uncomfortable for me, and I found myself until recently to be a late adopter.
Yeah.
So,
well, because it's hard, because you think, well, I've been doing it this way, it's working.
Yeah.
Why do I need to change? How do we know that's going to work, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I had it down pat with Facebook final expense, and I was going to the home, and I was like, hey, Mike, you said that your favorite hobby was knitting. Let's do it. And that was my go-to. And then I think it was the election happened, and when the election happened, it messed up all the Facebook campaigns.
Yes,
and there was a lot of vendors that almost went out of business because of that, because now it goes from a $25 Facebook final expense to a $50, and they couldn't sustain the cost. So they said, we're just not taking orders anymore.
Correct.
So then it was like, okay, what are you going to do? And I'm like, we're going to work internet leads. I'm like, I don't understand internet leads, these general life insurance inquiries. Like, they don't have a favorite hobby. What am I going to do? Because that's all that I know.
Right.
And then I was like, oh, I just call them up and say, hey, Mike, the one that you filled out about the life insurance instead of the final expense. And I also had this realization that final expense, mortgage protection, they're just made up terms for life insurance.
It's all life insurance.
They're marketing terms. And I was like, okay, all these lead types are just marketing terms for life insurance, and we're just pre-qualifying why they want the life insurance.
Exactly.
They want the life insurance for final expenses, for mortgage protection, or they just want life insurance. But now it's my job to figure out why they want the life insurance. So transitioning to internet leads, that was a whole journey. And then getting into mortgage protection. And when I got into mortgage protection, I was afraid because this is a different appointment. We're talking about mortgages and interest rates and loans, and it's really not as complicated as I thought it was, but I had never had a mortgage before, so it was a total foreign language to me, and it was a little bit more complex of a case design. We generally started agents on final expense because of the simplicity, where I'd say, hey, Bob, Mary, do you want to be buried or cremated? Buried. Hey, burial is going to cost about $10,000, so I'm going to show you three options. $20,000, $15,000, or $10,000. $10,000 is the bare minimum. $15,000 a little bit more. $20,000 is going to take care of everything and leave $5,000 for each kid. Which one do you want? And it was such a simple case design versus getting into mortgage protection, and now we're talking about pay off the whole house, do half the house on each spouse, equity protection. Oh, you have a reverse mortgage. It was all these things that it seemed like really hard to learn. And then once I learned it, I was like, oh, this is it. This is the ticket. I'm only doing mortgage protection. Let me get every mailer that I can get my hands on. And I did that for about a year and a half, 2 years. Yeah. And what an awesome experience. And then Telesales came out of nowhere. And I was the late adopter on Telesales. Yeah. It wasn't until I looked at my leaderboard, we did a top 25, and 24 of the 25 were doing Telesales. And I was the only person on the board. And granted, I was still like in the top 3. Yeah. But I was the only one still in the home. And I was like, my team decided for me. Yeah. They decided that we're doing Telesales. So I said, I'm doing them a disservice. I found myself recruiting agents, and I'd be like, do you want to go in the home or do you want to do it on the phone? Everyone said the phone. Right. And then I was like, oh, well, you should go work with that person over there. And I stopped taking agents direct to myself, which was a huge mistake. I gave away everyone who came into the business because I couldn't teach them Telesales because I wasn't doing it. So I was like, okay, time to learn. And there was an agent on my team who he gave me such a massive realization. He's like, dude, you've been in the home, all this time. And I was like trying to follow the scripts of the people who were doing Telesales. And I was saying the words, and I'm like, this doesn't feel natural. Yeah. I'm getting to the social security number, and they're just not trusting me every time. I'm like, what is going on? He's like, dude, all right, just close your eyes and pretend like you're sitting across the kitchen table from him and do the exact same thing you did in the home. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, just try it. And then I started doing that, just imagining I was sitting at the kitchen table and I started selling. And it was just because I started being myself. Yeah. And of course, I learned the little nuances of making sure that they know I am who I say I am and prepping them for the social. But you were
going into it treating it differently.
Yeah, I was treating it differently as opposed to just being the same person that I had been for the last 2 years. So it was a hard transition. And then the following year spent, the whole year learning all the nuances of the technology and the screen shares and all of these things. And then yet again, our industry is continuing to evolve and change. And now everything from CRMs to automations to texting your leads to book appointments as opposed to just dialing. And now this whole simple retirement solution, the company focus, IUL, if I thought that mortgage protection was scary, IUL was like the monster that I would never learn. Yeah. And I was like, I know mortgage protection.
Did you think that for a while?
Absolutely.
Like, I'm not even messing with it.
No, I'm not even messing with it because this is so complicated. Yeah. I didn't get it. And sometimes in business, you have to slow down to speed up. Yeah. And I got so in my head about if I slow down, everything's going to go backwards. If I slow down, I'm not going to be able to hunt for my family. If I slow down, I'm not going to be able to take care of everybody. And the slowing down to learn IUL specifically is what has given some of that harmony back for my family.
Sure.
Because now the average premium per household on an IUL is like 3-4 times higher than it was on final expense. About twice what it was on mortgage protection. Right. And the persistency is 20% higher.
Yep.
And the conversations are more fun.
Right.
I'm not fighting people most of the time. I get on the phone, hey, Mike, you fill this? I didn't fill that out. Whereas,
you're like, here we go.
Okay, here we go. Yes, you did. Here's your signature.
Right, got your email, got your favorite hobby, I got everything.
Yeah, but then the IUL, it's like, of course, you're with leads or leads. You're going to have people who are going to be a problem no matter what. Yep. But it was just such a different vibe when I got on the phone with someone and they're like, yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. And I educate them and then I'm having them pick a number as opposed to, all right, Mike, you have a $500,000 house. Oh, you're 70? Well, here's the number. Do you like it or not? Right. Whereas I go, hey, Mike, you're 40, 60, 80, it doesn't matter. What do you think you can save for retirement per month? And I'm going to structure something around that. And it was like people were giving me their number. There was no having to sell it. You already gave me your number. Right. I don't need to sell you on if you can do your number or taking your expenses versus what you got coming in. And it's a fun conversation. And then learning all these things, it's forced me to grow again. It's forced me to grow, and that's helping my team grow because they're seeing me grow. I think I found myself like I watched every TNL, every single training on mortgage protection and final expense, and then I stopped listening. I stopped listening. I didn't tune into the Simple Retirement Solution calls. I was like, I'm doing what I'm doing, and this is what we're doing.
So it's like the business was evolving without you almost.
Well, it was started to. Yeah. And then I was like, I'm not going to be a late adopter this time.
You don't want to get left behind.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not getting left behind this time. So then I was like, no, it's time to stop, slow down. And if that means sacrificing your pride as, let's say, Hall of Fame producer and taking someone on my team who was not a Hall of Fame producer, but really understood IULs and having them teach me.
Right.
Like that was what I had to do. And I had to have that person help me with a couple of appointments, and I had to listen to their appointments, and they were teaching me even though I taught them because they took the time to learn before I did. And then now I'm at a point where I don't have it mastered. The more complex IUL cases are still something I ask for help on, which you should be willing to ask for help on some of these. We're messing with someone's retirement.
Absolutely. And we have a whole team set up just for that reason. We don't expect every agent to know how to write every type of IUL. There's Ask a Specialist. There's SRS for help. Like you can tap in. One thing about everything you're talking about, Jamie, for me, it goes back to mindset and perspective. Like, so you mentioned starting on final expense and then almost being not afraid, but like hesitant with mortgage. Like that's a lot. Yeah. So when I started, we didn't have final expense. We only had mortgage. Yeah. So it's funny. What you're saying is the same thing a lot of the agents we worked with said about final expense. Yeah. We had a whole company. It wasn't FFL. We worked at a different company. Final expense leads came out. We were the only group in the country that sold them. Everybody else said you can't sell them. They all think it's free. They all this, lack of better words, bullshit. Yeah. But it's mentality. It's mindset. We looked at it as we have no choice. Mortgage leads are drying up. This was like 09, right after the market crashed. So we came in. There was nobody in New England, so there was a ton of mortgage leads. Oh yeah, we devoured them. Sean, we're buying every lead in sight. Now there's none. They go, we got these final expense leads. We're like, okay, we didn't know any better. Shit, we'll sell them. Everyone else in the company is like, no, you can't. Well, tell yourself you can't enough. You're going to believe it. Yeah. And it's like the same thing when you first looked at mortgages. It was complicated. Oh, it was complicated. Once you started learning, you're like, it's actually not that complicated. And then magically it became not that complicated. But it all goes back to mindset.
Absolutely. Everything we do in this business. Even with these evolutions, like the telesales comes out. You could talk yourself out of it. There's no way you can sell over the phone if they can't see. And you went through that a little bit. I look back at some of the trainings that I was doing, and I was telling people, I'm like, hey, I don't even know where this comes from. It's proven that persistency is lower. Yeah. There was no way to even prove that. And then what was funny was that then when we had, 12, 24 months of actual data, corporate came out and said, hey, persistency is not that much different. And I was like, oh, where did I even come up with that? But you believed it. But I believed it because I was saying it. Yep. Someone else said it. Absolutely. Which is what happens so much in this business. But if I say this so much on this podcast, the first two things Sean said to me when I started working with him 15 years ago, attitude, activity. Yeah. The only two things that you can control. Yep. And if you maintain those at a high level, you'll have whatever success you want to have in this business. That's right. Attitude. You got to have both, though. Yeah. You got guys that are
uber positive. Oh my God, it's the best day, but they don't do a damn thing. Then you get the guy working his ass off, but everything's negative. These leads suck, Jamie. I'll tell you what, this carrier sucks, and this and an FFL did this, and blah, blah, and that training sucks. You're like, dude, does everything suck? That's why you suck.
Yeah.
But you got to have both. Have you been able to, I guess, kind of check yourself along the way? Because it's easy to get in that something new is introduced, and immediately, like you said, you don't like change. Most people don't like change. Yeah. So right off the bat, we're going to find everything that's wrong with it. Right? Like, you can look at this wall over here. You can pick out, oh, well, there's a little nail hole there. Or you can go, dude, it looks pretty cool with the light and this. And you're right about whatever one you want to believe. Have you been able to kind of check yourself along the way and keep your mindset right?
Yeah, I think that for the longest time, I was just like, I was trying to be the ultimate team player. And what I mean by that is if anybody said anything negative, I jumped on their throat and be like, no, no, you're not allowed to say that.
Right.
The lead sucked. How dare you say that in front of the team? And I think I've learned a little bit more. And I mean, I've also transparently had, I've had groups come and go, from my business. And I think that there was a learning moment in terms of how I could have coached some of these agents when some of those changes happened, as opposed to just blindly saying, hey, get with the program. I could have really said, hey, here's what's going on. Yeah. And here's the perspective. Let me actually give you some perspective on what's going on, how this industry is changing, and how we need to gear up for it. But I think some of those people probably left me because they didn't feel heard.
Right.
They're like, hey, like, there actually is an issue with these leads right now.
Yeah.
And like, the reality was, in that particular scenario, there was.
Sure.
And I was like, no, there's not. You're just being negative. And that's not the solution either. But at the same time, I think there is something to be said about protecting the house.
Right.
There's something to be said about protecting your team from the negative people who plant seeds of doubt across the entire organization. I don't necessarily regret protecting the team as hard as I did, but at the same time, just looking back, I'm like, okay, when there are actual problems, like being solution oriented, teaching these agents how to be solution oriented instead of just saying, no, there's no problem.
Right.
Like, hey, okay, yeah, there could be a problem.
Sure.
But like, let's have some perspective here. We could be out, roofing in 100-degree heat right now, and instead we're calling leads and air conditioning. So
exactly.
And guess what? No matter how bad these leads are, they filled something out.
Right.
And that's better than going to the Walmart parking lot and getting random people to try to buy life insurance, taking someone from uninterested to interested. Even if they're 1% interested, like meaning they filled something out 2 years ago, that's more interested than someone who's not interested.
Oh, yeah. It's like, dude, two things can be true. It could be true that maybe these leads aren't the best, but they are interested in life insurance. Yeah. Like we're talking about some of these final expense leads from back in the day. I remember there was a specific lead that everybody hated. It said free on it like 10 times. Oh, yeah. I understand why people thought it was free. Yeah. But I also understood that if I sat down with you, you filled something out about life insurance. Yep. You know it's not free. You lived in America your whole life. Yep. Nothing's free in America. So I ran an appointment off of one of these leads. I went to the wrong house, Jamie. Yep. Knocked on the door, walk in, sit down. After I'm doing my presentation, lady's like, what are you here for? And I'm like, you fill that out. She's like, that's not me. That's my neighbor. I'm like, oh. And so you're probably going to get one of these anyways. Do you have life insurance? She's like, no, I don't. I wrote her a policy. Yep. So was the lead bad? It wasn't even her lead. Yeah. So two things can be true. Sure, not all leads are created equal. There's some, you can find something wrong with every type of lead out there. Yeah. But if you work on this, if you actually believe everybody needs life insurance, who cares if you have a lead or not? That's right. I've had the exact same thing happen in a telesale where someone's like, no, it's not me. I'm like, what, you got life insurance? Yeah. They're like, no, I don't. I'm like, okay, let me send you my credentials real quick. Let's talk. Let's set an appointment. But if your mindset's not right, you go, oh, damn, another one. Here we go. I told you these leads suck. Yeah. But it's why this is so important. I think it's just really important for agents to educate themselves on how this industry is changing, just because things do happen. Things happen to vendors. The lead quality does change. Yep. At FFL specifically, I'll try to be as politically correct as possible. I think we're like a bunch of lead crack addicts. Oh yeah. And lead what junkies, I mean, 100%. We're lead junkies. Yep. Yeah. And every time that a, quote, good lead comes out, oh God, we just gobble it up to the point where that vendor can't keep the quality. Yep. So we'll have this amazing Facebook mortgage protection lead. Everyone finds out about it. And then now they have 1,000 orders. They're on back order. And then they go from this high intent video ad to they post a static image to be able to get a bunch of $5 leads to make up for everything, or something like the election happens. And I think people need to understand that
or an ice storm happens in Texas and all the mail houses closed down.
Right, I remember that.
Like things happen, and you have to be real. And I think a lot of people, they point the finger and they blame and they go, "Oh, it's corporate's fault, or it's my manager's fault, or it's the stupid lead vendor."
Yep.
It's like, no, things happen, and you have to be willing to pivot.
Right.
I had a mentor who his favorite quote was, "You got to be like a duck, calm on the surface, but under the water, you got to paddle like hell." And it's like, okay, guess what? It's 2024. Election's coming up in November.
Right.
Facebook ad costs are going to go up.
Absolutely.
Start preparing right now.
Right.
Like, start understanding that your vendor come September, October might not be fulfilling the orders that you think they're going to fulfill. Sure. Or they're going to go from a $30 cost to a $50. You prepare for that now.
Yep.
It happens every 4 years. A lot of these things you can't prepare for. Do you have a backup vendor? Are you going into the ILC? Like, what are the things? Are you willing to work a different lead type and, be a little scrappy? Like, this business, you have to be resourceful, and learning to buy leads is also a skill set. Because if you're just like buying the same lead for your entire career, it's not going to work, number one, because things change. Right. And then also, like, if tomorrow all lead vendors shut down, what are you going to do? Well, do you have a book of business? Yeah. Can you call and ask for referrals?
Yeah.
Can you do annual reviews? Now? Like, are you using Legacy Safeguard, Emergency Response Network? Like, I think it's just a matter of being scrappy. It's a matter of, like, I look at it the exact same way as when an agent has a massive chargeback with a carrier. It's like, what are you going to do to climb out of this hole? Right. I recently had an agent who he had chargebacks everywhere. Okay. And he's like, man, like, can you please turn my advance back on here? And can you do this and that? And I was like, no. And like in the past, I might have been like, okay, well, we'll just turn it on here so you can do this. And I was like, no, we're not going to. And you know why? Because you need to learn this lesson the hard way. I'm like, it's going to be a fight, but you got to fight your way out of this hole. And when you do, you're going to prove to yourself that you can do hard things and you're not going to do it again. Right. And it took this agent months to do it. And they ended up paying off everything and being completely debt free with all the carriers. And they were like, dude, thank you. Thank you for making me do that and figure it out. I'm like, all right, now let's just not do that again. Right. But now you've proven to yourself, like, I mean, I don't think that I necessarily have persistency issues, but I get chargebacks and I sell big policies. So there are days when I wake up and there's a big chargeback. Yeah. That means I have to go to work. Right. And I'm not discouraged saying this business doesn't work because I got a chargeback. I'm saying, okay, let's go back to work, do what I'm supposed to do, cost of doing business. And, this isn't the first time I've climbed out of a hole. Right. Let's do it again. And the more times you do it, like, I remember getting my first $2,000 charge back with Americo. I'm going, oh, it's the end of the world. That was a big one. Pen from other agents giving it to me. It wasn't even mine. Sure. That's part of this business too. Yep. People, agency managers go, oh, debt, the insurance industry sucks because of that. Well, this is a part of the business. Right. Clients do cancel. We get advanced.
You own a Walmart, people are going to steal a certain amount of stuff. Yeah. You own an insurance agency, there's a certain amount of business that's going to fall off the books. There's agents that are going to quit, and you're going to have to deal with some of it. It's part of the business.
Absolutely. And, like, I thought that my $2,000 chargeback was a big deal. Or when I was producing and I had $10,000 off my own pen that was charged back, I was like, oh, man, I can do hard things. And then when I had an agent roll me like 70 as some fraud, which is a part of this business too, I was like, all right, time to get to work. Let's roll up my sleeves. And I was a little terrified. Right. But then I did it, and it was gone. I was like, okay, you can handle anything. Yeah. Like, you can literally handle anything in this business.
Absolutely. Jamie, a lot of people watching. Someone who's not with us right now, where could they follow you? On what social media platform? What's your handle? Jamie_Chirio. JAMIE_CHIRIO on Instagram. And I think it's the same on YouTube and my first and last name on Facebook. There you go. Check them out. And the thing about this business is, as technology evolves, the changes are going to happen quicker. Yeah. Right? Like, I'm talking, 15 years ago, we just had paper ads. And it took, probably 5 years to get an e-app. But the amount of changes we've seen since then compared to dude, it's night and day. Every few months, there's a new product, a faster issue rate, a new type of lead, a new way to get clients, a new way to sell. It's going to keep happening faster and faster. And it's like you're either going to evolve with the times or get left behind.
That's right.
I'd like to end with some stuff, Jamie, that's nothing to do with life insurance at all. So I got a list of some random questions. I'm going to throw a few at you. Are you a movie, music guy? Or?
In the last recent years, haven't had a lot of time with kids to be able to sit down and watch many movies, but in my past life, I was a major comic book nerd.
Really?
Everything, Marvel, DC, even the most.
Oh, I got the perfect one for you then.
Yeah.
So, if you could be any fictional character, who would you be and why?
Either Iron Man or Batman.
Okay. Everyone says Batman. You have to pick Iron Man.
I don't even think of really Batman specific.
Yep.
Just because they, businessman by day,
Yep.
superhero by night,
There you
and they did everything off of businesses that they built. They
Yep.
weren't just given some crazy ability.
Elon Musk wants to move us all to Mars someday, right? So let's say you're a movie guy, right? Back in the day, you can only bring one movie with you. It's a movie you're gonna watch for the rest of your life.
Oh man! All right, this is kind of morbid.
Okay.
Armageddon with Bruce Willis.
Okay.
That's the first movie as an adult that I had like a real tear when
Really?
when Bruce Willis left himself behind. I was like, now you got kids, and it's like you cry all the time when
Dude.
you watch movies. As soon as you have kids,
I cry at I'll watch Frozen and cry
Oh,
now.
for
I
sure.
mean, dude, everything. Dude.
Oh, yeah,
Whoever's had
everything.
kids, yeah.
yeah, we watch Air Bud, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna cry. But I remember that movie Armageddon with Bruce Willis. That is
Yep.
one of my all-time favorites. I could watch that over and over again.
Nice. Last one. Do you have a guilty pleasure song that you jam out to that's really embarrassing that you don't want to share, but you're gonna anyways?
Dude, I'm not much of a music
Okay.
guy, to be totally honest. I'm like,
You have a guilty pleasure movie then.
guilty pleasure movie.
Like Grease or something like that.
I'm still a wrestling fan.
Okay.
I watched it when I was a little kid, so
Love
I
it.
still love WWE and
Nice.
all that stuff. So I would say that's like a guilty pleasure that I find myself, if I'm up late at night
Yeah.
rocking the baby, I'll have my phone out and I'll
There
watch
you go.
something. So
Well, dude, it's great. We actually went to WrestleMania in Philly. It was phenomenal.
you went this year?
Yes. And now my 8-year-old is a diehard wrestling fan. So every night she falls asleep watching a wrestling match.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Tonight, Raw is in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm here.
Oh, man, you're here.
and I'm
Well,
here.
sorry about that.
That's
We'll
all
plan
right.
that out better next time.
That's all right.
Well, dude, I appreciate you coming up. I really do, especially knowing that now you missed Raw to come up here and
Yeah,
talk to
exactly.
me. So that's a big deal. But I appreciate everything you do. Keep kicking ass. Keep evolving with the times. Guys, thanks for checking us out. You know where to find us every week right here on True Talk. We'll see you next week.